Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so we'll start the work session. For everybody online, we're City Council is joint work session with the Walton City Rec Commission Board on the topic of the community center Bower Gym project. So I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. It's the best weather out to be getting out in, so thank you all for coming. But I'll probably kick it off with Corey and Susan, just give an update on kind of where everything is from your committee standpoint. And we'll kick it off from there.
Yeah, I'll start. So, as you know, they worked on this plan based on community feedback over and over again. Community center, community center. And obviously, that's design and plans. The building, of course, has limitations because it's historical, so it can't be altered for the field. But our site draft is the tax credits, and we have a building that has a lot of history and meaning in Baldwin City. Throughout the conversations that the group has had in the community, which has consisted of, I think it's like hundreds of people, various groups and individuals. Basically, over and over again, we do not want a property tax increase. So I know that's definitely a sore spot among the Baldwin citizens. I know that this does not check all the boxes for the rec center, and unfortunately, all those boxes, it would be a property tax increase to get that type of development. Am I missing anything?
No, it's kind of stretches as far as we can go as far as the committee level goes. And now it's getting to the point where we're needing a council resolution, put this on the ballot, let the citizens make a decision on it. And we obviously have reached out to the rec board, and when I have some further discussion, we're kind of at that point. I've kind of been describing it as a bottleneck of time, and now here we are. And it's like, now what do we do? So I feel like the committee's done as much as they can. They've done the community outreach. And now I know there's been some suggestions that the process could have gone differently. That's kind of why we're here, to kind of discuss maybe what direction to go from here. So.
Yes, well, I mean, from the rec standpoint, I certainly don't want it to seem like this is stopping when we sent the letter. We feel the letter adequately kind of puts where we're at with the plan that's currently proposed. I can certainly respect and appreciate, where you guys and how you got that process. We have another process that is run in the past, kind of in parallel or even before this, that led us to conclusions that are maybe different because also you guys are now, shifted it as a community center, not a rec center. Primarily for me, one of my concerns is, really comes down to, if this decision is made, it's done this way, it forgoes a lot of quality of life, the possibility of some quality of life enhancements that we feel are important for the future. Doesn't mean that this piece isn't necessarily some part of that. We just feel it warrants, even this, maybe some additional discussion among us to come up with a more comprehensive and global plan for that. Because, as I talked to Corey, he's like, well, I don't know if you guys are on board, if we can move this forward. But us being on board is not necessarily tantamount to your goal. I mean, we have to make sure that we reach our organization's goals. So for me, that part is, I think it warrants a little, notwithstanding, the Bauer Group did a lot of, good research. I mean, I think we can all agree through both organizations, this community wants a community center. How to fund that? Property tax versus sales tax, I don't think anybody wants any taxes. And I can sit here and tell you, I have some concerns over a sales tax versus a property tax. And it's just philosophical, and I can respect where you guys, you're at, and then where I'm at and what we could raise. Vice versa, house paid for, house distributed among the community. And I mean, and that's not what I'm concerned about. I don't want to get into that. But for me, it's just more that if we're going to make a decision this big, I think there are other quality of life projects that we need to look at and make sure that this is part of it, because it will affect all of those for the next 20 years. So I think it warrants, more discussion and maybe a little broader research on it. I think the Bauer Advisory may have done a good job. They were very focused, right? Here's your building. What can we do with this? And I think now before we rush into that, we need to look at that in a little broader aspect. And we appreciate, we almost say, I appreciate being able to come and sit and kind of talk through that. And I'll let anybody else speak. I have some thoughts on that, but I don't want to, shoot on down that road and everybody's like, wow, well, we didn't need to do that. So that's why.
So yeah, I guess for direction purposes, it is kind of halted, I guess, for the time being, because we're at a place of maybe considering different directions to go. And I guess from a committee standpoint, is the Bauer building, as far as the rec's concerned, can we even see that as a part of some kind of even additional plan? Is the Bauer building in the equation at all for checking any of the boxes you guys need? I understand we're talking apples and oranges. We're talking community center versus rec center. Those are two very different things. I don't see that building as a rec center. I just don't. I don't think it's going to be adequate for programming. And so I don't think that's what the intent from this committee was, to try and get to that point. But is there any, and last time we were here in this room, I think we left kind of saying, well, let's go back to the engineer. Let's see if we can come up with kind of a secondary building to couple with this one to get some more boxes checked, etc. Is that no longer, where are we?
We had that meeting and there are no boxes that we could be checking, Corey. One of the things I did learn, because I was on the rec commission when we attempted to get the community center out by the high school, land donated by the school district, needing a sales tax, which was approved by the city to be on a vote, needing the property tax from the school district, and that the school board wouldn't go forward with that. So we were sort of dead in the water. But one of the things we did learn, it is very important to collect needs, wants, concerns from your community from an outside source. We did not do that. We took it upon ourselves to to talk with people like the committee has done. And when we got down to the brass tacks on everything, we didn't have the benefit of somebody else outside collecting the data for us and driving the vehicle this way, because we didn't have focus groups. We didn't have this, we didn't have that. And I think that was one of the weak parts of our approach, was that we had taken ownership of collecting and sharing everything data-wise. And we probably shouldn't have done that. We probably could have done a better job. When we basically put together our need for a strategic plan, that's one of the very best benefits we got out of this whole thing is we identified focus groups. They collected the data, they spoke with them, we didn't touch anything. So when we received it, it wasn't tainted by our 5 opinions or anything else. It was basically what that entity had collected, and that's what drives us. And I'm glad, because when this document sits in front of me, and it should be noted that each participant identified a new community center and or a pool complex as a priority, we know that's not 5 of us, whoever that was at the time. That's our community. We did identify, and I was thinking about what kind of focus groups could we put together if we wanted to bring an outside agency to collect information. Well, you would need a senior advisory, senior citizens. You could have historical, you could have tourism, you could have a variety, you could probably have 5 or 6 focus groups that you could then share with the outside entity that says, here, this is where we think we can get a good diversity of information. We also had the challenge when we put together this strategic plan here, we identified focus groups, and then they did ask us to help with some names, and we tried to find names of people that we knew wouldn't like it, as well as would like it. That was our challenge. So, I could rest much easier if I knew that that was an approach that we would be willing to take. There's already good collection of information from what the advisory group has already done. There's already good information from what we've collected. It is not ancient yet. Because this is 2 years old? 2019, I think is right? And I don't think basically, I continue to come here knowing that this is what drives me right here, but I don't think that this community strategic plan was one of those that would say, and we're willing to wait 20 years. To get a well-designed, multi-use complex that actually could have an economic impact coming into our community, because we would be able to host things. We already know we have facilities that allow us to make a difference economically in this community. So, if I don't have anything else to stand on, I know that basically this is right here and this is right here for these reasons. Not because I wanted it, but because some people in the community told us. I don't think it's not too late. It's not too late. And we may find out the very same thing, but we may not. We might find differences out there, other suggestions. And I know the group has done as well as they could in COVID times, communicating with people.
So going with that suggestion, so one of my thoughts, because I really spent a lot of time in the last week and a half. Why do we come together on a Tuesday and say the same things we've been saying all week, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking, I watched the last work session you guys had on strategic planning. I watched online. Nice meeting. I was caught by a couple things that I appreciated, Mr. Kramer saying, it may not be a rec center, but if we put the rec in there, it's where I go to, sign my kid for soccer, it's where I go to sign for that. It will be the rec center of the community. That is a very sensitive issue to us. We're called the rec now, we're at the strip mall. And it's a great office, it's a good spot, it's downtown, we like that. But I'm saying that's the perception. But I kind of go back to Mr. Lorison was saying, we've got a lot of people saying we need a community center someplace for this. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the Bower Gym is part of that, but what I would be all for is an outside entity coming in to gather more of that data from an independent view. Nothing wrong with the Bower stuff, that's fantastic. Nothing wrong with our stuff, it's fantastic, but they can use it as a base to start. And let's figure out what we really need in a community center, because the thing that happens too of those, you get where you get what you want, and that's including from our youth. This is what we want. What can this community support? What can this community sustain? And what's the big plan when we give them a list of all of our quality of life wishes and assets? Doesn't mean we get it all, but how does this fit? And what, more importantly to me is like, we both probably have some things that we want to include in that scope. Like for us, the ability to ensure that, I had a conversation with one of our commissioners today, is like, what happens years from now when that building, that tax isn't there, and we can't make any revenue off that? I mean, as far as just maintenance costs, keeping it going. Where's all those little details at? But if we can give those kind of things in that scoping call with a firm, and I'm sure, I can sit there, if I were in your chair, I'd be saying, I want the Bauer gym, it's an asset we now have. How does that fit in this? I mean, we both probably have certain needs, and I don't call them concessions because it makes it sound like we're giving up, but certain needs to be in that scope, and then we ask a firm to do that for us. And we see what that takes, and then not try to just cram it all into a Bauer gym, but say, this is a quality of life plan for Baldwin. These are the players, and then we move forward on how do we get those players behind us so that we're all as one community moving towards that goal. The part that takes the hit on that is the timeline. But I'm one of those people that will say I don't see the timeline as a factor against getting what I think the community can benefit from more. And more importantly, trying to plan for the future and make sure all of those qualify assets. And that's kind of where so that's I asked Matt to try again to get some ideas. I don't know what a study like that costs. I would like to have I'd like to have a firm. Again, it's not that we don't want to partial to us. We want partially. I want a firm though that does look at quality of life and or recreational, because that's the kind of projects we're talking about. Because I think they can draw experience across the country, or have colleagues they could draw from. To say, hey, this is typically what we would see, or we've seen people do this and it worked for 5 years and didn't work for 15. I think it'd be important to vet them out now. But to me, that is a good step going forward. That all of us can, sit there and have we're behind us. This meets our needs. And there may be, just like when we did our strategic plan, there may be things that come back that there are things in our strategic plan I will tell you, I'm like, oh, really? But like Jenny said, I still, as a commissioner now, will stand behind it. It wasn't necessarily what I would have done, and we intentionally didn't put ourselves on those committees. That was like the weirdest thing to me when we did it. Why do I not get to see that? Well, people gave us really good input when we were in the room. And so having an outside party that does that kind of work for us, gives us back that plan, and maybe helps us narrow what we need to do, to me, that's a way forward. It comes at the cost of the timeline. But I don't know if I necessarily see the need to rush a vote, a timeline. That ultimately goes to the council.
I'm sort of excited to see the staff recommended timeline for replacing the existing pool with a new aquatic center, to look at their timeline. Beginning the study, and then basically we begin finalizing, and then 10 years construct a new facility. Wow, I could see an aquatic center, a community center. My daughter lives in Valley Center. They have built a new library. They have a dog park. They have existing outdoor pool, and they're building a new rec center with an indoor aquatic feature to it. And then as soon as they basically get that done, then they will upgrade the outdoor pool. But they have a timeline, and they're blending these things together. I mean, wouldn't it be sort of normal to have a rec center and a pool together? That would be pretty nice. But you're going to have, city and the school district, Baker University, if at all possible, blend our efforts together.
Yeah, that's why Julie brought these notes.
Yeah, I'm glad she did that. Yeah.
Do these through our committee, through our strategic planning for the city, we talked about those other quality of life projects that we need to know more about as we go forward. And that's why she brought those here today. So that's something we'll need to work with the rec commission on looking at.
So if this does go to a vote, say council moves it forward to a vote for citizens, is the rec commission interested in programming it? Are they interested in, have you guys had those discussions?
There's limited programming there. I'm gonna go back to what I always say, this is more of a personal thing, because we have not necessarily, we talked about it as a group, but as a group, we look at, and it's not that we're looking at the negative side, but we have to look at the limitations. That it doesn't give us another place, another full gym. So looking at that, the staff, that it takes to open another location and have it open all the time. It presents more of the things that we're trying to focus on. What would that take, right? So it tends to hit us in more of a restriction. Personally, you say, what would you vote, Sean? I would look at that and say, I have to see it when it's done. And I know that I'm not trying to be coy or avoid the question, but it really is, throughout the whole entire year that our group has worked on it and done a good job. I've seen this presentation. You came to us with almost what the final product is, but I have talked to people that you guys have presented to who have said, well, I didn't know I was going to have that in there. And they were new, those things were new to me, and I understand that because you go out and you get community feedback and somebody wants something else. But then that concerns me, right? Because it's like, oh, that group is expecting this. I talked to somebody the other day, said they might be able to put a museum in the corner. And again, that isn't that you promised them, but the perception out there is that. So then that museum in the corner, well, what kind of space does that take up? I mean, does that make sense? So for me, it comes back to the same thing we should be talking about before it was put to a vote is, if anything, how about a true final setup? This is what it's going to be before you put the record on spot. I guess it's a nice way to say it, because I don't know if we've ever really felt like it's there. It's always this, or it's all these. And those are all good uses. But to put them all in there is probably not a workable building. And then to have us put, for lack of a better way to frame it, our organizational name on the side and be considered the rec. And it may not be very much rec programming. Or it might be filled up. We need, I agree. Maybe use another place to have some nice lunches, business, whatever. But when you do that, it's immediately set up time, clean up time, table, all this stuff. It's not necessarily available for rec activities. So those are my concerns. I think there's a lot more of that kind of stuff to be answered before I can just, from my viewpoint, to go, yeah. I don't think I can answer that. And my other commissioners are here. I think they probably can speak to their own viewpoint. That's how I see it.
I don't care to be a custodian of a facility that doesn't do what we need it to do for 20 years.
I probably don't need to make the council's probably tired of hearing my position, but I'll state it again. We got some new folks, but I think all along my concern has been, how we came about the planning for this. And I think some of the things that have been proposed, if we really were doing strategic planning well, and I think we're starting to get into that as a council a little bit better. If we were having a quality of life amenity strategic plan, we would certainly, like we do in infrastructure, want to reach out to all the department heads. We would certainly want to include all the stakeholders in the community in that space to make sure that our strategic plan lined up with those other quality of life stakeholders. And that just did not happen here because we started with a footprint. And if I go back to my original premise that, if we list quality of life priorities, the Bauer building is not a quality of life priority. It's an asset we can use some potential way. But if we didn't have that building, I think we would have approached it more of what does a community center / rec center, what's the community want and willing to fund? And because we started with a footprint, it really limited those discussions. And I think they got valid data based on if you had just this footprint, would you support this? And if that's your only choice and you believe you'll get nothing else, that's an easier yes than a choice of would you be willing to consider something else with a different funding mechanism. So to me, it was just kind of how we got to this point. I think we can take a step back and approach it differently and maybe end up at the same spot. I would feel a lot more comfortable that it's the right spot if we were approached in a different process. And I just don't see the need to move quickly to get this done. When we heard from the architect that building is gonna outlast us all, it's gonna be standing, it'll be the last thing standing. So there's no mechanical reason that we have to rush to do this. And I think there's a lot of reasons, including still uncertainty around pandemic, economic, impact of that, and just, potentially subverting other things that we might find out the community wanted as well, or otherwise. So I'm for taking a step back and doing it as more of a collaborative approach with all the quality of life community stakeholders, coming up with data, utilizing what's already been done, and finding out what that looks like when everybody's involved from the beginning with equal input. So I don't think that's anything new to my fellow council members.
I agree with that. I agree that we really need to make sure that we're reaching out to different entities in the community. Because I am a firm believer that at the end of the day, everybody in this community wants the same thing. They want what's best for both. We have to figure that out. When you guys, or the committee asked us to write a letter, we wanted to make sure that we didn't write a letter that was against it, because we're not against it, we're not against making it community better. But I think that we really just want to see just more of what everybody said. More input on it. Talk to, more members of the community, more person. Figure out what's best and what we can support too.
So basically what I'm hearing from you guys, if we get an outside source to gather the data, and that data comes back and it, leads us back to where we are, then we are all on board with going this direction. If the community comes back and says, no, we want bigger, we're willing to pay, then we need to find a way to get to that place. Is that the takeaway that I have?
And I think I kind of like it. I mean, you might interpret Scott's comments that way, so I don't want to sound like I'm arguing, but I kind of think it was where Scott's at. That let's figure out what that big picture looks like without the mold we have to fit it in, and then figure out how we get there. And if for me, an outside vendor came in, outside consulting group looked at us and had experience with communities our size nationwide and said, "What are you thinking? This is what you should be doing. You'll never support more." I will sit here and tell you, I may not like it, right? I may not think it's in the best interest of the rec, but I would tell you that I'd probably be, and it isn't that I don't validate what the value is now. I have a better time knowing we took our time, and They took, Bower took their time, but we took our time and had somebody who's comfortable with all that and knows and has that kind of experience come back and tell us, this is probably your best plan forward and the most feasible to accomplish your goals for the next 20 years. I mean, does that make sense? Like I said, you and Scott might be saying the same thing, just the way you explained it, but I think that is the approach that, yeah, I mean, I can get you. I may not, like I said, I may be I don't like that, right? But I think that comes back to me more as this is what's gonna be the best for both of them. And not that it's doing, community development wasn't doing what is best for both of them. I just feel better knowing we've looked at all of it, not looked at the scope of this building in a very poignant timeline that has put the pressure on it to just get to a solution and do it now. And shoehorn a lot of things in. Does that make sense?
I would say, I think a lot of assumptions are being made that shoehorn and a timeline was put onto it and all that stuff. But yeah, we said, did goals get set? Yes. But I don't think the group felt like they were rushed by any means.
Well, I know, but I'm going off, again, this is not the point, but I'm going off that we're down to crunch time, decision has to be made about ballot or not. And I mean, to me, that is shoehorning. I've had conversations with city council members where it's, well, if the rec isn't going to agree to go in there, it's going to pass. And those conversations to me make, when we say not the best fit for our organization because of this, that is kind of a shoehorn us in. You know, I mean, so again, no insult intended with that, but there's still that, you know, make this work, let's get this. And I'd rather have the open approach to figure out what we need without the scope and requirements of the building.
I guess Susan, I'll respond to that. I would fully support the outcome of all of this quality of life stakeholders coming together and agreeing on the process of how they're going to go forward and figure this out, including maybe an outside. So if this group said, this is how we're going to go approach this, and everybody agreed, everybody therefore then is going to live with the results of what comes out of that. And I would fully support that. And it may not be what people wanted, but if you agree that this is the process we're going to follow, everybody's good at the beginning, everybody's going to be good at the end, by definition. So that ideally would be, I think it's kind of what you said, but I don't know what the right approach is, but I think that's what the committee of all these different organizations would have to come up and agree upon. How do we want to go approach this? I guess I'd say we just take the building out of it, the location out of it. We start with needs and wants and ability to afford, have those discussions, and those will drive you down into something. And then you can say, well, we're so close, we've got this asset, can we use it? We may have to give up. Then you start making those trade-offs, I guess, at the end. Once you see what you think is supportable and doable, then you figure out where it goes and what you put it in and how you leverage assets you may already have, including land, et cetera. So I support, I think what you said is we had an approach that generated that result. I support whatever came out of it.
Well, and that's,
Okay.
go ahead.
My feeling is that, kind of going off what Scott said, that is this what the community's going to want for the next 20 years? I mean, it seems like the Bower building, just the size of it, I mean, you guys put in it what you could, right? But I'm not sure that will serve our purposes for the next 20 years. And I think if we went a different direction and tried to put in things that the community wants and can grow into, because I think the Bower building, we've grown out of it before we're ever in it.
Okay, so we've heard a lot of, I'll just explain where I've come from here a little bit. I've talked to a lot of you individually before and after I got to this committee. I had some questions about even a little bit of the process that I think was expressed to a lot of you. And obviously that opinion's changed a little bit since being on the committee, and I'll tell you how that happened. So we talk a lot about strategic planning, and in strategic planning, one of the big things that we talk about that affects as things dovetail the hierarchy is opportunities. And coming into this, for the first couple meetings, what exactly are we doing here? Okay, well, we thought about this, we thought about that. The property tax question was a big one. That was the first data that we got back was a real big data. That people were like, absolutely, I think it was like 90% of people were horrified about property taxes. Okay, maybe we need to relook at this opportunity here. Maybe this sales tax initiative might be able to, it's better to check some boxes than none type of deal. And I guess that's really, I was looking at this more as an opportunity and still do. And I still would like to see the Power Building part of either a bigger project or I don't want to see it go, I think we all agree we don't want it to go away. And so it's complicated. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here, and I've sat in this chair, I think, right here, and said, this is really complicated. I don't think it's wrong that we are exploring opportunities and how to do something with this asset that we found ourselves to have. I'm glad that we're in this room and we can talk about how to move forward and hopefully include that asset as a part of it. But I would be very disappointed if that building went away and we didn't end up doing anything with it at all. At least we can at least start where we agree.
I don't think anybody wants it to go away or tear it down or anything like that, but, maybe we need to look at other uses for it.
That's my problem though, is that's where it starts to get complicated, is that if you don't make it a community center, whatever you're gonna make it is gonna be a $1.2 million something. And so okay, we'll make it a visitor center. I mean, are we really affording a $1.2 million visitor center? Oh, well, let's make it this. It's so far off from being anything right now because of its condition that this is why if you were on this committee and you sat here and you went every Thursday at 4 o'clock talking to someone over, you just kind of get there. You're like, this has to be some part of a bigger community center conversation. Otherwise, making it anything else is ridiculous for a $1.2 million any kind of other entity besides a community center, rec center type deal. So if you want to save the building, you have to kind of cross, I feel, this community center conversation, and it has to be in there somewhere.
I have a question about the use of it. To me, it's got to be. I know the word asset comes along. If it is an asset or a liability, my thoughts from the rec standpoint, from the way I've partaked everything, was getting the rec involved gets people excited about going to vote for it because of the rec possibilities. The first day we approached it, I'm thinking for my own son's baseball team, being able to drop nets in there and have batting practice in the middle of the winter time. What an asset small towns that have that ability to do, or the high school or the college. So I saw the rec as, yeah, that's huge because we can help generate that. But after listening and kind of going through it, I feel like making it strong with the rec, while it will help meet a need that people want, I can't see how the rec can make it an asset because we can't run programs that generate revenue to pay bills down the line once the tax is gone. Where like a baseball field, and I thought about it, at the baseball complex, you can have tournaments which brings in money that helps pay for things. On the other side of the hill, there's a baseball field there. It's a baseball field, but because it's so small, it still fits that baseball field, but it's just a practice facility that you can't generate anything with. So to me, the whole time has been my thoughts of making it a civic center where you could have meetings down there and have little conferences, and people could rent it for weddings and rent it for graduation parties, where there is a purpose for it to generate its own revenue to offset some things where it's not such a tax burden. But to say it's a place to play basketball, if everybody's playing basketball, nothing else can go on down there if basketball's being played. And it becomes, to me, a scheduling nightmare to try to fit in a craft, and then a basketball, then a meeting, and that falls back on eventually like a rec situation where we're managing things where we don't get any assets from it. Where I thought maybe what other entities like the lumberyard or anybody else would be interested in maybe managing that as part of their facility to update theirs, where they can have a bigger venue, because that room is bigger than the lumberyard. That room down there, it's bigger than any community civic center we have. Does that open the city up to bring in speakers or bring in authors or bring in, the college can use that as a facility? To me, that makes it an asset, where when it's just pure rec, there's no way of making it an asset from a rec standpoint, because our programming needs 2 gyms, or a programming needs a full-size gym, or multi-use fields. So that was my concern, is were you guys able to go out and find another entity in the community that could utilize that X number of days that would make it now an asset to the community? And so they see, wow, the city got together, they came with this idea, and we're using it for weddings, we're using it for reunions, we're using it. Now they said we want a community building or a rec building. Now there's a good taste in their mouth from what they just saw we did with that. They're going to be more open to say, what's the next step? And I feel from a rec, we fall into that next step as opposed to trying to program that building. When they drew it up, it's just so small for our purposes. That was my thought.
So to answer that, I think what the committee was thinking about for the rec is the rec already manages all the other city assets that we own. And so in their mind, they were thinking of it, and I think Brian's mentioned this a couple times, as an indoor Sullivan Square type thing. The rec already manages that. There's not a whole lot of rec that goes on in Sullivan Square, but the rec manages it. Same way with the golf course building, different things like that. So that's why you guys were already kind of the entity that managed a lot of those buildings for us. Whether you guys are in there or not, that was kind of their thought processes. They're set up for it. They're used to, having these spaces to manage on behalf of the city. So that's how they came.
I mean, is there an idea or mindset that if this space, we could hold 200 people for a guest speaker, or this space, Baker could have a lecture come over and reserve that to where it could become a revenue. And I'm just using it from the baseball field reference we did this summer. Matt did a great job taking advantage of our facilities because people were shutting down. We had those tournaments. We were able to use that facility to generate income to put back into the field. I would see that still being a good facility that could house things, different levels of things. Not like a major rock concert, but could you have different people go in there for open mics or acoustic things, or different, like the sororities at Baker could rent that out to have one of their little facility parties and stuff like that. Not alcohol parties, but just groups and gatherings. That's what I was thinking.
Actually, more of the
You make more
conversation
money,
is
yeah.
gathered around that type of stuff than it gathered around the rec.
That's more benefit.
The rec
But-
sports that you go on.
But where I guess I'm confused is, that does sound nice, and that sounds great too. I mean, that's what a wonderful use of that building. It's still gonna take away from that quality of life funding that you guys are, so this is a tough position here, because whatever we do with it's gonna take away from you guys.
It
It's
doesn't
something that you-
necessarily have to be that way.
Please tell me how.
Okay, basically, and I'm thinking I've got 5 of you guys here that are city council members. I want you to hang your hat on a strategic plan that is not focused on the Bauer building only. You let me know through however you collect, because I know it's not easy, Corey. It's not easy at all. I know that. It's not easy when you're a loser, and it's not easy when you've got things put together and it's sitting here, because we need to go forward, because that's what we do. I want my city council members to work on a strategic plan that creates timelines, that basically gives us strategies on how we get from this priority to this priority to this priority to this priority. What resources does it take? What partnerships does it take? What finances does it take? I worked on a strategic plan on a nationwide, the National Federation of State High Schools. Nationwide. We even had to try to figure out phone systems and stuff like that. But you have to wait your turn if you have a strategic plan. But it's understandable about why you sequenced what you have, because you found out what your priorities need to be. I don't want you guys to be satisfied with hanging your hat on the Bauer building. I want you to be able to hang your hat on this strategic plan that addresses the aquatic needs, the infrastructure needs, whatever it be. Sell me on that so that I know that this is where my money is going to go to achieve what? To then basically get this thing going. Just like the pool here. Great timeline. It's not like tomorrow, but you can put that in here, and this one is. So I know it's It's a lot of work. I know it is possible. But a lot of that work and a lot of that concern that basically you may not have the answer for can be obtained by an outside agency, an outside business that knows how to collect what you're looking for, or maybe collect what you're not even looking for. I'm just not going to, I've lived here since '86. I don't want my city council members to be only thinking as high as the Bauer building. I loved the idea when I heard you guys are going to do a strategic plan. School district, I taught for many years. The school district put together a strategic plan. The thing with strategic plans is they expire too. That's an ongoing process if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And you've got to understand, and I've got to understand, that this is a rotating, moving body of people that are city council members, just like when you're asking us, what do we think? Well, what I think, I could be done by June. Somebody else is coming on. Whatever. But I think we have got to lay our cornerstone, our anchor has got to be, this is the direction that the community is asking for. Or these are the directions that the community is asking for. What, I know it's possible. I know it's possible on the local level. I know it's possible on the national level, and it's on the state level, because I've had those experiences. But you don't have to come up with all the ideas on your own. There are people out there that are educated to do that. They're professional. That's what they do. And if we have to spend some money, like Scott said, if we can just determine how to get, what are the players? And then what do we do with knowing who the players are? That's what we had to do when we did our strategic plan. And it's what's going to continue to drive us. And you've got to give us some respect for the fact that we know what we know and why we know it and how we found it out. So you may not like our not jumping all over everywhere, because we understand that that's not going to let us achieve what we need to do, we're given direction in our strategic plan. We have to wait for 20 years to do that? I don't think so. But I think there's a way that we can work together to put things together. And there are players in this community, including the school district, that could be a part of this. I'm just passionate about the fact that the strategic plan is so important. That's where your efforts need to be, from my point of view, having been a voter of this community. It's what you need to do, so that no matter who is here, who the mayor is, who the council members are, your community has a direction.
I think that also answers your question. I think there is a way for it. I do think maybe it's some kind of looking at an entity, somewhat, find out how we can get that scope together. This is the first time I've seen this, and I totally appreciate you saying opportunity. Sometimes opportunity presents itself, and that may be part of this.
Right.
I understand that. I kind of see, this is literally the first time I've seen this, and this kind of, when I see that 5 to 7 years on a pool, I think, again, that outside entity may have some input on that for us. So we're not back here in 10 years going, what do we do with the pool? And my big fear is, what do we do with the pool in 10 years? And then the worst question is, we didn't plan for that and know how to pay for it. There is no. So from my point, I think we can kind of come up with that ahead of this now. Incorporate that. And again, that outside firm may go, yeah, no big deal. We see this all the time. Here's how you plan that in there. It's best on the existing site, or whatever it is. I think relying on our input, it's our community. Nobody knows it better than all of us and the people we already have involved. But having outside lens to kind of help us coalesce all that, help us shape that without some limitations, and then put in the Again, I'm not, when I say without limitations, like, it has to work with our building, but certainly I understand, it's like, we have this asset, how do we make this part of it? That makes sense. How do we make sure we have a plan for, here's all the info, in your plan for quality of life. This building needs to have some, part of that. We're looking at, staff telling us there's going to be a pool of fires, kind of thing. All that can be part of that, and then we can all gaze at and stand on that, so move forward together and make sure we are going forward. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. And planning, I love it, strategic planning, we're very passionate about that. It doesn't scare me at all. What scares me is end up doing nothing. That scares me. That really does. If we're here in 15 years with still nothing to stand for.
So I'll say that we don't have to know anything about what goes on in the building to start saving it today. We don't have to know if the rec's going to be in it or a visitor center. We can start that now. I still believe, and I understand what you told me about the tax credits. I didn't know that, but I still think that we start with, we know there's mold in the building, because when Susan and I were on a council that accepted it, we were told there's mold, and you need to put a roof on it so that it'll dry it out so that the mold won't grow. We know there's mold in there. There's 2 grants that are due March 1st. I don't know if we're eligible or not. I forwarded those to some of you. One of those is from the National Park Service, $500,000 distributed to Kansas, 2 buildings that are on the National Registry. That same National Park Service will be here in June. Their directors will be at Blackjack Battlefield and the Santa Fe runs. To me, when I made a stupid comment at a work session, which I usually do, when I talk about what if the WPA, the federal government, helped us finish it, that's starting to help us finish if we could get some of that money. We're down 2 grant cycles. We were down last year through the HCC. We didn't apply. I don't know that we can. We may not be able to. But I feel like we could have been a couple $100,000 into this project, start saving it now. The rules are there. SHPO told us what we can and cannot do. It has to have a basketball court. It has to look like what it did. It has to have certain windows. I can't remember exactly what you said about the tax credits, but I wonder if there are bits and pieces of it that we can start doing now while we work on this as a whole. That's just me. I don't know if that's possible. I can't remember what you told me.
The tax credit, so basically what we were told is that you can't double dip the grant. So what you're already saving in the tax credit, so I think it was, X amount, $600, $700,000. So you can't, so if let's say you went out and got $1,000 worth of grants, you actually only have $300,000 worth of grants because you still had 7,000. You have to make up for that. So
I feel like there's probably other buildings that have mixed those 2 things somehow. I don't see how mold is part of a construction project. I think mold is something if you got rid of and then sold the tax credits. I don't know.
I don't either.
But I feel like, when the oxygen mask drops in the airplane, you got to put it on yourself first. And I feel like that's where we're at with the building. I think the more we focus on what we can do right now with it, I would like to see that. I don't know if it's possible with the tax credits the way they are.
And I don't know what constitutes saving the building. How much do you have to do before it's deemed saved? Here's your tax credit. So
Right. I just think.
I'm sure there's a process there.
Yeah.
I know that we just get around 20-some% state tax credits for everything. Goes to rehab that building, and mold is included with the asked Jay in that, just because we can't inhabit that building without remediating it first, so.
But we don't need a sales tax we don't need a
I'm not saying
validation.
that, I'm just saying that I believe that the mold remediation is part of the, now whether we pay for that, if we get some money from selling something and roll into that or whatever, then I would imagine that we could keep the receipts and then sell the tax credits. But I think what Corey's just saying is that any grants we get gets deducted from the tax credit side. That's Jay's worked on a few of these.
I'm not sure about if some do and some don't.
But yes, I think we can start looking.
I think doing those things might help build momentum for the project and for the community supporting it. Whether they would vote yes or no, I don't know on the sales tax issue, but I don't know. Every little narrative builds a bigger narrative that helps support what we want to do. So that's just me. That's where I would start with, is with what the problem is right now, which is saving the building, and then there's what we invite the rec commission here for, which is talking about something else.
Well, and that intrigues me because the plan that the committee came up with was a half cent sales tax. Half of it being, so a quarter of it going toward operation that doesn't sunset. That kind of answers your question you brought up earlier about what happens after 20 years. That operational cost will always still stay there. That other quarter cent would drop off. But if you can get a quarter of it shaved down, we have, what is it, 3 years, 4 years, the library quality of life comes up, and that's a quarter of a cent? Is that a quarter
I
cent?
think it's
About 5 years.
5 years.
5 years.
Prices fall apart.
So then you're back to your half cent that this project didn't take anything away from any rec initiative to go out and get something bigger.
Well, I guess I would, again, I want to look at the big picture because I would sit there and say.
Well, I do, that was.
We just talking from the library.
This would start, so we
I mean, because I don't expect the library to always want to stay exactly in the state they're in now.
Right.
I mean, so I guess I'm sitting here as a rec commissioner, so don't take that from the rec, but community-wide focus, and I think that's kind of what we're saying. It's a big community quality of life picture that we need to focus on, that I wouldn't want to take that from. I wouldn't want to see
It's
it.
a pot, it's all,
It
it's
is,
a pot.
and that's it. And when you come to
Just make the
so
pot
if I
bigger.
can just explain real quick, my version of the sales tax, roughly, it is that, I mean, what does an average family in Baldwin spend? In Baldwin? I mean, is it $200, $200, $300? I mean, so that's $1 a month, $1.50 a month if it's up to $300. That equates to roughly $14 to $17, right? I mean, that you're paying, for Baldwin citizens, you're collecting on that sales tax. Part of my version of that is that $17 is a much bigger portion of income. For me, that maybe isn't a problem I'm worried about right now, but there's an economic uncertainty in it. But lower income, that does affect them. I'm not saying property tax doesn't, but the property tax that were proposed in the rec center a couple of years ago, and Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, were about how much, what was the impact on your annual property tax bill?
I don't have that.
Okay. I think, and again, I'll be the first I need to look through the documentation, but I think it was like roughly $16, $17 a year. That was the tax amount. So when I look at that, and I would want to verify that, so I'm not gonna say, right? But if that's roughly the same, and then I think, well, the rec property tax, we move forward with that. We're gonna have a wider service space. Because I know you guys already all discussed that too, like, we're gonna collect it here, but this area's gonna have to go for the rec, be able to go. I look at that, as we can actually collect more that way. And it's out of dollar pocket to citizens. Could be comparable, or I think as Scott Burton wants, maybe it's more, this much more, but if they're getting more, because we took the time to come up with a big plan that encompassed people, then maybe that discussion isn't so much, I don't want property taxes, this is what I want. It becomes a higher value for the money. At the end of the day, $15 out of someone's pocket is $15 out of someone's pocket, right? Whether it's property tax or sales tax. And it's not that I totally disagree, I want to be very cognizant of that. Because I think you all are also, I want to turn it to a value discussion. When we get to the value, it's a value for the dollar. So, and that's when you should kill it. It's not, I'm not there for property tax, I just look at that. Because also, the other piece, sales tax are going to affect lower income families involved who don't need, one, by virtue, it's a great percentage of their income. And it's going to affect senior citizens who don't need Baldwin as often for their services, for their goods they buy, most everything here. And it doesn't mean that it's there, we all agree, we all vote as a community to pay it. That's the way it's budgeted. But that's what when we say, sales tax and property tax, the two should be looked at as it's dollar out of the pocket of the household involved in the shop. Does that make sense?
I've looked at it, believe me, I've looked at it that way too. Here's, Baldwin's not just your average community. Baldwin has a college in the middle of it that is paying property tax. We have 900 students that don't pay property tax. We only get sales tax from them. And so it's not like a standard town. You can't just, I feel like the same philosophy at a macro level doesn't really apply at the micro level here in Baldwin because of our different dynamic. It's only 4,500 people.
Right, I agree.
And you have 20% of them not paying property tax, at least just with the college.
Not to mention, you're collecting sales tax on everybody that comes to Baldwin and spends money, as opposed to only taxing the citizens of Baldwin.
And I totally understand and appreciate that, but I would say we have less, and especially in the last couple of years. With Midland, not sure where they're at right now. We have less reasons to come to Bowling.
Actually, our sales tax is up.
And I think pandemic is some of that because people aren't leaving. And I think, we can almost trace a lot of the sales tax revenue being higher in the summer from some of the visitors we brought into town. And direct comment. And there's no way to draw that line.
Glenn does.
Okay, but there's no way, I don't like it when organizations say we're directly responsible for this, right? But I think I'm just simply saying, I think we deserve to look at that and just be cognizant before it's just a no, this, no. But I also can appreciate you guys been out talking to people. I said, I can respect that fact. I just want to make sure that we're not just downplaying what the sales tax increase in this community means, and it still comes back to value for the dollar, planning, and looking at the big picture may assure us we get a better value for that dollar spent, whether it's in the Bauer building or the Bauer building in conjunction with something else, or Bauer building, whatever it is.
As a concern with membership fees, was saying we were not gonna have any, and I fear, a larger facility would have to membership fees on that, and we were excluding a lot of the lower class citizens. And that was part of our goal. And the more we talk this out, the more I wish we could have had this dialogue sooner. Because I finally, it seems like there's a lot of places where we are not thorough. I think you guys talk about, looking at bringing in revenue from outside, bringing people into Baldwin. Whereas, the advisory group's always been very community focused. We've been focused on, how are we going to serve the citizens of Baldwin. So there's a lot of areas where we are not meshing, and it really concerns me as we move forward. I don't know how we come together and how we meet in the middle.
I think the only way you can do that is just get in a room and all agree that you have the end goal in mind to improve, quality of life for Baldwin. Start there, and nobody leaves figuratively. Multiple meetings, everybody's got to buy into the end goal, and then the process, and then live with what comes out of that.
I think without a doubt, everybody in this room wants what's best for Baldwin. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the positions that we're in. So, yeah, I think that, we've gone out and talked to the citizens, but, it takes an outside source to gather that information. Find out where we can go, what direction we need to head. I'm happy with any direction, whatever is going to be best for Baldwin. At the end of the day, that's really all we want. I'm hopeful that there is a path that will also allow us to save this building. Like Corey said, it's an opportunity, and we need to pass that by.
And I appreciate that, Susan, that we did miss the opportunity to probably have some of these kind of conversations early on, because, when I look at our strategic plan, we have 6 performance areas. One is communication, another one is leadership, programming, which we basically know is very important, partnerships, which is what we're doing right here, fiscal sustainability. That's what drives a lot of, you don't maintain the fields for free. You have to have a way, since we don't own anything and basically can't own anything, we basically have to have a way of making sure that we have programs that help sustain themselves. And then we need any improvements. And then the other one is facilities. So those are our key performance areas that are in our strategic plan: communication, leadership, programming, partnerships, fiscal sustainability, and facilities. And, a lot of those go together, of course.
And Corey, you had said that you were afraid that we would get to a point where we weren't going to move forward. I don't think that's going to happen. I think everybody in this room wants to move forward. This really excites me. I'm a former swimmer, and I coach for the swim team, so the indoor part of it.
Right.
But how do we do this too? How do we do everything? And I think that's what we're saying. We need to figure out, can we do it all? And if so, how do we do it?
I think, to clarify, I wasn't speaking as in we wouldn't be able to move forward because of not buying from the rec. I was speaking if this thing grows to a point that citizens don't want to pay for it. Because the citizens will tell us not to move forward.
But
That's what I was speaking
yeah, and I think that that's something we need to make clear. If we do have somebody coming in and help us with this, what can we afford? What can we afford as a community this size? And if it's just the Bauer, it might just be the Bauer gym is the best you're gonna get. But if it's not, and if they've seen it in other communities have supported it, then we need to look at that. Because I guarantee we're talking to the same people. You know, we're talking when the committee went out and talked to the people about what they wanted, it was the same people that we were talking to in our strategic plan. So, you know, I think we just need to look into it.
The outside data we built right into our strategic plan too, so it would support that quality of life area that we looked at during the last meeting.
I mean, I had Matt try to acquire a couple firms, but we didn't get all the information back. I don't want to throw a number, you know what I mean? But just because coming out of this meeting, our board kind of talked about, what do we want? You know what I mean? Not just to have another meeting.
Yeah.
You know, so we, again, I don't want, you know, none of us can vote here as a work session. But I mean, I can have Matt kind of formalize something so we have a rough idea. And I don't know if there's a way to share that without all of us coming together and then, you know, have this discussion about, you know, what that step, if it was this step, what does that look like? What are the commitments? And then I do think if we have some representatives kind of help scope that, so that you know, so that you're not getting back something you're like, got what they want, you know, and likewise, because I'm perfectly good with, like, just like Melissa said, they come back, they say, this is, you don't need to worry, you know, Matt will hate to hear me say this, but if they come back and say, your rec person's dreaming, you know, never have outside, you know, this is good. I get it. Like I said, I mean, I like it, but I get it. And I want to be in a community that, and I'm serving in a volunteer capacity, putting my time towards something that, you know, I'm confident in. And so I'm good with that. But we can kind of, I can have that waiting on time. We've got one back that we can get something, so we have an idea that can be discussed. I mean, I don't know what CDC.
That's the mayor's call.
Yeah, bring it to, Glenn probably needs to work directly with Matt first, and then we'll assign it to.
That way as a whole.
Yeah.
Pretty good thing.
On a poll there, you know what I mean?
No.
Nothing official.
Okay, so I guess moving forward,
Let's see what it costs. And that's what I want to know first and foremost. How much is this consultant cost? And how do we pay for it? I mean, that's a big one. So,
And what are they gonna do and what's the outcome?
Kind of that scope and
How are they gonna approach it? Do we agree with it?
when you talk about hiring all these people, but if it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, I'm not saying that it probably will, but we've seen what some of those are.
yeah, and I mean, you also have to cross, you know, I don't know anything about this, you guys may, you may be from the last of it, whether you have to have two different consultants, one for the economic feasibility of it, and two for the strategic planning.
Well,
Do they have, they're all in one, they make all
Sure.
one?
Yeah, if you get the right one.
And I think we can try to share, my hope is that we've got the Bauer Group research, we've got our strategic plan, and while the end result of the plans for those 6 years, we get I'm not, but I think there may be some base data in there that can build on. So what I would hope is that we can needle whoever the consultant is and say, hey, I mean, build on this, there's some really good building blocks, but help us fill in the gaps and looking towards the future, this kind of information. So, and, you know, have that working plan and then maybe come up with that and then.
And I think Jeanette probably has some materials left over from the visioning of Baldwin City that basically had some of your entities, some of your partners. I think that's another good area of collection that's already had Kent State University sort of guided that retrieval of information. So that's available.
And I think that would help with our strategic plan.
Oh, sure.
Overall, not just for the Bauer building or what the rec wants or whatever, but I think the big picture, they could help us with that also.
Yeah, that's the
It's a whole
intent.
section.
Because I've looked at the
It's got its own
recs,
week.
I've looked at the rec strategic plan, I've looked at Jeanette's visioning, that she gave me a copy of, and our council's strategic planning that we've been doing, we're a long way from anything like what they have.
That's what we lack is that.
We lack that
Data piece.
outside, that
Mhm.
independent person, or entity to come in and help us with, to do what, that, what we got from that lady that kind of helped.
Patty.
I don't think we got anything out of that. Not really. We got stickers and that's about it. I mean, I thought she was gonna help us develop more of a strategic plan, and we didn't get that. And I think if we get an independent group that can, give us some direction.
Let's get a template on what that looks like, or what the cost.
Yep.
I mean, is that? I think those are valid points. We work with Patty's group too. We did I can't want to call it a package, but she says, but we had the outside focus groups and some surveys. So I do remember the day we did stickers too. That, we were looking at stickers from all the different focus groups that had already done their stuff too. So let's maybe get a template of what some of these groups call their studies.
Sure. Okay. Well, I think last time you and I spoke, I expressed regret that we went so long from the last time we had one of these to the next time, so.
See you next week.
See.
We got a council meeting.
I
Work
think,
session after that.
I keep them going. So let's keep this conversation going because I don't think it could stop naturally. I think we all in this room want to see this go up.
And this is one of our strategic goals, is to formalize the relationship with the Recreation Commission. So it's on there.
And the other entities in town.
Yeah, that's what ours are, partnerships is what we call ours, And those people need to be brought to this table too, along with.
All right. Thank you all.
Don't forget to feed them that